You might have seen the headlines flashing across your screen tonight or heard the anxious conversations starting to bubble up in your community. The panic is palpable, and frankly, it is understandable given the gravity of what is being reported. You are seeing stories about phone lines at the Social Security Administration being jammed and hearing that seniors in places like Florida and Pennsylvania are demanding answers about a leaked draft of an executive order. The headline suggests that Donald Trump is preparing to sign a directive that could effectively freeze monthly benefit checks for millions of retirees under the guise of cost-saving measures. It is a terrifying prospect for anyone who relies on that fixed income to keep the lights on and food on the table. But I want us to take a step back from the immediate shock and the breaking news chyrons. We need to look at this through a different lens. We need to look at the machinery of the economy itself, because what is happening here is not just a political maneuver or a broken campaign promise. It is a fundamental stress test of the American social contract. We are going to walk through this together and dismantle the economic logic, or perhaps the lack thereof, that drives a decision like this. When you hear phrases like temporary restructuring or cost-saving measures applied to a program like Social Security, you should immediately be skeptical. In the world of fiscal policy, and institutional power language is often used to mask the movement of capital. What we are seeing here is a clash between political expediency and the rigid reality of federal obligations. You were told on the campaign trail that this money was off limits. You were given a guarantee that the system you paid into your entire working life would be there when you needed it. That is the basic agreement of the social insurance model. You contribute labor and capital during your productive years, and in return, the state facilitates a transfer of wealth back to you in your later years. It is not a gift. It is a deferred wage. So when an administration proposes to freeze or restructure these payments, they are effectively tampering with a trust fund that belongs to you. This is why the panic is not just emotional, it is rational. It is a reaction to a breach of contract. To understand how we got here, we have to look at the broader fiscal landscape. The United States government operates on a balance sheet that is increasingly strained, not necessarily because of spending on social safety nets, but because of how revenue is collected or not collected and how debt is managed. The leaked draft reportedly outlines these cuts as a necessary step to balance the budget, perhaps to make room for tax breaks that favor capital over labor. This is a classic move in what we might call austerity politics. The narrative is always that the belt must be tightened, and almost invariably the waist that gets squeezed is yours, not the waist of the corporate entity or the high net worth investor. When economists warn that a temporary freeze is actually a permanent cut, they are talking about the time value of money and the erosion of trust. If you miss a check this month, or if your benefit is delayed, that is liquidity that is gone from your household economy. You cannot pay your bills with a promise that things will be restructured later. We have to ask ourselves what mechanisms allow a president to even consider this. Executive orders are powerful tools, but they are usually limited when it comes to the power of the purse, which constitutionally belongs to Congress. However, there are administrative levers that can be pulled to slow down disbursements or reallocate funds under emergency declarations or efficiency mandates. This is where the bureaucratic machinery becomes a weapon against the working class. By redefining the flow of funds as a management issue rather than a legislative change, the executive branch can sometimes bypass the safeguards that are supposed to protect your benefits. It is a subtle form of institutional power that operates in the shadows of the massive federal bureaucracy. You need to understand that this is not happening in a vacuum. The pressure to cut entitlements has been building for decades, often driven by a specific economic ideology that views Social Security not as a right, but as a liability on the national ledger. There are powerful interests who believe that privatizing these systems or reducing the state's role in retirement security will unleash market forces that are supposedly more efficient. But efficiency for the market often means precarity for the individual. When you hear about these leaked documents, you are seeing the quiet part of that ideology being said out loud. It is a signal that the protective wall around Social Security is not as impenetrable as you were led to believe. Let us think about the immediate impact on the economy if this goes through. Social Security is not just money sitting in a vault, it is a massive engine of consumption. Over 60 million people receive these checks. When that money hits bank accounts, it is almost immediately spent. It goes to grocery stores, utility companies, pharmacies, and landlords. It circulates through the local economy, supporting jobs and businesses in your town. If you freeze that flow of capital, even for a short period, you are pulling the emergency brake on a significant portion of aggregate demand. This is the part that often gets left out of the high-level discussions about balancing budgets. By trying to save money at the federal level, you risk triggering a recessionary shock at the local level. You are taking money out of the hands of the people who are most likely to spend it, and that has a ripple effect that touches everyone, regardless of their age. I want you to consider your own situation right now. Maybe you are retired and watching this with a knot in your stomach. Or maybe you are still working, looking at the taxes coming out of your paycheck and wondering if the system will even exist when you are ready to retire. This news reinforces a deep cynicism that many of us feel about our institutions. It feels like the rules are constantly being rewritten to benefit those who already have the most, while those who rely on the system are treated as line items to be managed. But we cannot just stay in that place of cynicism. We have to analyze the power dynamics at play. Who benefits if the public loses faith in Social Security? Who gains if the system is starved of resources? Usually, it is the proponents of privatization who use these crises to argue that the government is incompetent and that the private sector should take over. It is a strategy of breaking the system to justify replacing it. As we dig deeper into this leaked order, we need to separate the noise from the signal. The noise is the political finger pointing and the media frenzy. The signal is the specific policy proposal. What exactly does it mean to freeze benefits? Are we talking about a delay in processing, a reduction in the cost of living adjustment, a suspension of payments for certain income brackets? The details matter because they reveal the intent. If the goal was truly to save money, there are countless other places in the federal budget to look. We could look at subsidies for fossil fuel companies, or the bloated defense budget, or the loopholes that allow multinational corporations to pay zero in federal taxes. The fact that the target is the retirement security of seniors suggests that this is an ideological choice, not a fiscal necessity. In the next part of this analysis, we are going to look specifically at the demographics mentioned in the report. We will break down exactly which age groups are allegedly being targeted first and why. We will also look at the concept of intergenerational equity and how pitting the young against the old is a tactic used to distract us from the real concentration of wealth. We are going to continue to peel back the layers of this story because you deserve to understand not just what is happening, but why it is happening and how the economic machine is being rigged against the average citizen. Stay with me as we go deeper into the numbers and the incentives that are driving this potential crisis. Let us look at the specific numbers that are causing this wave of anxiety, because the details in this draft order are specific and they are targeted. The breakdown we are seeing suggests a tiered approach to these so-called cost-saving measures, and it reveals a lot about the actuarial cynicism driving this policy. According to the documents, the first group in the crosshairs are not the oldest retirees, but those in the early retirement window, roughly between the ages of 62 and 67. The logic being applied here is brutal, but from a purely accountant-driven perspective, it is calculated to maximize immediate savings while minimizing political blowback from the most vulnerable demographics. The proposal effectively freezes the cost of living adjustment, or COLA, for this specific cohort under the pretense that they are still capable of re-entering the workforce. This is an economic coercion tactic disguised as fiscal prudence. If you fall into this bracket, you are being told that your inflation-adjusted raise is being canceled. In an economy where the price of groceries and healthcare is still climbing, a freeze is mathematically identical to a cut. If your purchasing power drops by 3 or 4% because your check did not keep up with inflation, that is money taken directly out of your pocket just as surely as if the government reached in and removed it. We need to talk about exactly how much money is at stake here for the individual household. For the average retiree in this bracket, a freeze on the cost of living adjustment combined with the proposed temporary restructuring of base payments could amount to a loss of anywhere from $150 to $300 a month in real purchasing power, depending on your benefit level. That might not sound like a fortune to a billionaire investor or a cabinet secretary, but for you it is likely the difference between paying the heating bill or buying prescriptions. Over the course of a year, we are talking about thousands of dollars stripped from your household budget. This is not just a rounding error, this is a transfer of wealth. When you aggregate this across millions of seniors, you are looking at billions of dollars being siphoned out of the working class and middle class economy. And where is it going? This is the crucial question. The draft order explicitly links these savings to the need to balance the budget to accommodate new fiscal priorities, which is code for tax incentives for capital holders. We are witnessing a direct pipeline being built to siphon liquidity from your retirement check into the portfolios of the ultra-wealthy. The administration is calling this a temporary restructuring, but as an economist, I have to warn you that in the world of federal policy, there is rarely such thing as a temporary cut to a benefit. Once a baseline is lowered, it becomes the new normal. If they succeed in freezing these payments for 6 months or a year, they establish a precedent. They prove that the third rail of American politics can be touched without the government collapsing. This opens the door for more aggressive measures in the future. Today it is a freeze for early retirees. Tomorrow it could be means testing for everyone or raising the retirement age to 75. The slope is slippery because the intent is not to save the system, but to fundamentally alter the contract between the citizen and the state. They are testing the waters to see how much pain the public will accept before breaking point. Now, I want you to consider the broader economic ripple effects of targeting the 62 to 67 demographic. This is not just about retirement. It is about the labor market. By squeezing this group, the policy creates a powerful incentive for older workers to stay in or return to the labor force, not because they want to, but because they have to. This increases the supply of labor at the lower end of the wage spectrum, which suppresses wages for everyone, including younger workers. It is a classic divide and conquer strategy. If you have a 65-year-old forced to take a part-time job to make up for a lost Social Security check, they are competing with a 20-year-old for that same position. This keeps labor cheap for corporations. It is a systemic loop where the erosion of the safety net benefits the employers who want a desperate compliant workforce. You have to see how these pieces fit together. The cut to Social Security is not an isolated event. It is a lever that adjusts the bargaining power of the entire working class. We also have to address the panic that is happening right now in places like Florida and Pennsylvania. These are states with high populations of retirees, and the political fallout there is significant. But the economic fallout is immediate. When people are scared, they stop spending. If you are watching this and you are worried your check might not come next month, you are probably already cutting back. You are canceling that trip, you are buying generic brands, you are delaying repairs on your car. This behavior, when multiplied by millions of people, creates a demand shock. The very measure intended to save the government money could end up slowing down the economy, reducing tax revenues, and actually increasing the deficit in the long run. It is the paradox of thrift. By trying to cut costs at the expense of the consumer, the government sabotages the engine of growth. It is bad economics driven by bad ideology. There is another layer to this leaked order that is deeply concerning, and it involves the mechanism of the freeze itself. The draft suggests using administrative delays in the Treasury Department to slow the velocity of payments. This is a technical maneuver that avoids a direct legislative vote. If Congress had to vote to cut your Social Security, it would never pass because it is political suicide. But if the Treasury simply slows down the processing times or implements new verification requirements that result in pending statuses that effectively pause payments, they can achieve the same result without a single vote being cast. This is the weaponization of bureaucracy. It is what happens when institutional power is turned against the people it is supposed to serve. You might be told your check is delayed due to a system update or a verification audit, but the reality is a deliberate throttling of cash flow. I want to speak directly to those of you who are looking at your retirement accounts and feeling a sense of betrayal. You did everything right. You worked hard. You paid your payroll taxes every single week. You were told that this was a guarantee. The anger you feel is justified. But we need to channel that anger into understanding the mechanics of how this theft is being attempted. They are banking on the fact that the details are too complex for the average person to follow. They hope you will get lost in the jargon of restructuring and actuarial adjustments. My job is to make sure you do not get lost. We are going to shine a light on every single mechanism they are using. We are going to look at the tax breaks they are trying to fund with your money. We are going to look at the corporate interests lobbying for these changes, because when you understand the system, you can see that this is not an accident. It is a choice. In the next part of this breakdown, we are going to shift our focus to the why behind the timing. Why now? Why is this leaked order surfacing at this specific moment in the political cycle? We will examine the relationship between the national debt, the bond markets, and the pressure from international creditors. We will also look at the specific tax cuts for billionaires that are allegedly being funded by these cuts to your benefits. We will follow the money from your mailbox to the offshore accounts where it is destined to end up. This story is bigger than just a frozen check. It is about the fundamental structure of who gets paid and who gets played in the American economy. Stay with us as we continue to dismantle this crisis piece by piece. We have to ask why this leaked draft is surfacing at this precise moment in the economic cycle. Why is the administration reportedly preparing to sign an order that essentially freezes the lifeline for millions of seniors right now? To understand the timing, you have to look past the political theater and look directly at the bond market. This is where the real governance of the global economy often happens far away from the voting booth. Right now, the United States government is under immense pressure from what we call bond vigilantes. These are the large institutional investors, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks that buy American debt. When they lose confidence in the government's ability to manage its fiscal house, they demand higher interest rates to hold that debt. We are currently seeing a spike in yields, which tells us that the creditor class is demanding austerity. They are effectively holding the nation's credit card hostage and saying that they will not lend any more money unless the government proves it can inflict pain on its own citizens to balance the books. This executive order is not just a policy choice, it is a signal to Wall Street. It is a performance of fiscal discipline designed to calm the markets at your expense. The narrative being sold to you is that the country is broke and that we simply cannot afford to maintain Social Security at its current level. But this is a fabrication. The United States is the wealthiest nation in history. The issue is not a lack of resources, it is a deliberate misallocation of those resources. While the administration is drafting plans to freeze your cost of living adjustment, they are simultaneously preparing a package of tax incentives that would permanently slash the corporate tax rate and eliminate the estate tax for the ultra-wealthy. This is the other side of the ledger that they do not want you to see. In fiscal policy, every dollar has to come from somewhere and go to somewhere. If they cut taxes for the billionaire class by $1 trillion, that creates a hole in the budget. To fill that hole without spooking the bond markets, they have to cut spending by $1 trillion. They are looting the Social Security Trust Fund to pay for a tax cut for the donor class. It is a direct transfer of wealth from the bottom and the middle to the very top, disguised as necessary budgetary housekeeping. Let us look at the specific tax breaks that this austerity is meant to fund. The leaked reports suggest that the administration wants to reduce the capital gains tax, which is the tax paid on profit from selling assets like stocks and real estate. Most working people make their money from wages, which are taxed at a high rate. The wealthy make their money from capital gains, which are already taxed at a lower rate. By cutting this further, they are ensuring that the idle rich pay a lower effective tax rate than a nurse or a truck driver. They are also looking to lock in the expire provisions of previous tax cuts, which primarily benefited high income earners. When you hear them say they need to freeze your check to save the economy. What they really mean is that they need your money to subsidize their own tax liability. You are effectively paying for the private jet of the CEO who just laid off 1,000 workers. The cruelty is the point because the cruelty demonstrates their commitment to capital over people. This dynamic reveals the true nature of the state in a capitalist system. The government is not a neutral arbiter looking out for the common good. It is a terrain of struggle where organized money usually defeats unorganized people. The reason they feel comfortable targeting Social Security is that they believe you are too divided or too distracted to fight back. They are betting that the complexity of the financial jargon will keep you from realizing that this is a heist. They use terms like entitlement reform to make it sound like they are fixing a broken system, when in reality they are breaking a functional system to extract value from it. Social Security is one of the most efficient and successful programs in American history. It keeps millions out of poverty. It does not add a dime to the deficit because it is funded by its own dedicated tax revenue. But that pot of money is a tempting target for politicians who need to find cash to pay off their donors. By freezing benefits, they are effectively borrowing from your future to pay for their present political debts. Consider the role of international creditors in this equation. A significant portion of U.S. debt is held by foreign entities. These creditors do not care about your retirement. They do not care if you can afford your medication. They care about the stability of the dollar and the ability of the U.S. government to service its debt. When the administration floats a plan to cut social spending, they are sending a message to global finance that they are willing to sacrifice the domestic population to protect the value of the currency for international trade. It is a form of economic imperialism turned inward. You are being asked to tighten your belt so that the global financial system can continue to operate smoothly for the benefit of multinational corporations. It is a stark reminder that in the eyes of the global market, you are not a citizen with rights, you are a liability to be managed. We also need to talk about the concept of the deficit hawk. You will hear a lot of politicians in the coming days claiming that they are deeply concerned about the national debt. They will go on television and wring their hands about the burden we are leaving to our grandchildren. But notice that these same politicians are never concerned about the debt when it comes to funding a new war or bailing out a failed bank. The deficit only matters to them when the money is going to working people. It is a rhetorical weapon used to enforce class discipline. When they say we cannot afford Social Security, they are lying. We can afford it easily if we simply ask the wealthy to pay their fair share. But that is the one solution that is never on the table. The table is rigged. The menu of options is limited to cuts for you or cuts for your neighbor. The option of taxing the rich is strictly off limits. The leaked order also reportedly contains provisions that would alter the way inflation is calculated for the purpose of benefit adjustments. They want to switch to a formula that mathematically understates the real rate of inflation faced by seniors. Seniors spend a disproportionate amount of their income on health care and housing costs, which have been rising much faster than the general inflation rate. By tweaking the formula, the government can technically say they are still giving you an adjustment, while in reality they are giving you less than you need to survive. It is a stealth cut. It is a way of draining the value of your benefit over time without ever having to announce a formal reduction. It is death by 1,000 cuts executed with a spreadsheet. This is the banality of administrative evil. It does not look like a villain twisting a mustache. It looks like a bureaucrat changing a variable in an equation. As we move to the next part of this analysis, we need to look at the political machinery that allows this to happen. How can an executive order bypass the legislative process to inflict this kind of damage? We will look at the specific legal theories being advanced by the administration's lawyers to justify this power grab. We will also discuss the potential legal challenges and the role of the courts. But most importantly, we are going to talk about what this means for the future of the social contract. If they can freeze Social Security by fiat, what is left of the democratic control over the economy, we are standing on a precipice and the ground is crumbling beneath our feet. You need to know exactly how the legal and political levers are being pulled so you can understand the scale of the fight ahead. Stay with me as we examine the constitutional crisis hiding inside this economic crisis.